Metropolitan General's policy was brutally, unequivocally clear. It was a mantra drilled into every employee during orientation. Do not provide medical care to non-admitted individuals outside of the hospital's official capacity. It was a zero-tolerance rule, a shield forged by the legal department to protect the hospital from the endless threat of lawsuits. Engaging meant risking everything: her job, her license, the career she had poured her heart and soul into. She could call 911 and walk away. That was the correct thing to do, the safe thing. But then she looked at the man's face. His eyes were squeezed shut in agony, his lips tinged with blue. He was someone's son, maybe someone's father. And right now he was just a human being in a world of pain, alone in a dark alley. The clock on the wall of the nurse's station was a tyrant. Its stark red digit screamed 1903, marking the end of Sarah Jenkins' 12-hour shift. But the chaos of the emergency department at Metropolitan General Hospital paid it no mind. Here, time wasn't measured in minutes or hours, but in heartbeats. The frantic, fluttering tachycardia of a car crash victim. The slow, steady rhythm of a patient finally stabilized. The terrifying silence when a rhythm was lost entirely. Sarah moved through the storm with a practiced calm that belied the exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. She was a vessel of efficiency and empathy in a sea of organized panic. In one moment, she was titrating a dopamine drip with the precision of a chemist, her brow furrowed in concentration. In the next, she was kneeling beside a gurney, her voice a soft anchor for a frightened child, no older than 5, with a nasty gash on his forehead. "You know, you're being so brave. You're like a superhero," she murmured, her fingers deftly cleaning the wound. "Even superheroes get little cuts sometimes. That's how you know they've been busy saving the world." This was Sarah Jenkins. At 29, she possessed a quiet authority that came not from a title, but from competence. Her colleagues, a mix of grizzled veterans and wide-eyed new graduates, relied on her steady hand and her uncanny ability to de-escalate any situation. It was a skill she had honed over 7 years on the front lines of urban healthcare, a place where human suffering arrived without an appointment. Her final task of the evening was Mrs. Peterman, an 84-year-old woman in room 3, admitted for pneumonia and suffering from dementia. She was agitated, her frail hands twisting the thin hospital blanket, her eyes wide with a fear that couldn't be soothed by medication alone. She'd been refusing her IV antibiotics for the last hour. Another nurse had tried, then a resident, both leaving frustrated. Sarah entered the room, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air. She didn't approach the bed immediately. Instead, she paused by the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to prick the twilight sky. "It's a beautiful evening, Mrs. Peterman," Sarah said softly. The old woman stopped her anxious fidgeting and looked at Sarah, her gaze wary. "My name is Eleanor. I used to sing, you know, on a stage." Sarah turned, a genuine smile touching her lips. "I bet you had a beautiful voice." She pulled a chair close to the bed, not as a nurse to a patient, but as one woman to another. "What kind of songs did you sing?" "The old ones," Eleanor whispered, her voice raspy. "The ones that tell stories." "I love those," Sarah said. She began to hum, a soft, simple melody from a bygone era. It was a tune her own grandmother used to sing. Eleanor's eyes, which had been darting around the room, settled on Sarah's face. The tension in her small frame seemed to melt away. As Sarah hummed, she gently took Eleanor's hand, her touch communicating a wordless message of safety and care. "Eleanor," she said, her voice still a low hum, "we need to give you some medicine to help with that cough. It will make you feel so much stronger. Can we do that together?" The old woman looked at the IV line, then back at Sarah's calm, reassuring face. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. Sarah expertly and painlessly administered the medication, her movements fluid and sure. She stayed for another 10 minutes, long after the task was done, simply holding Eleanor's hand until the old woman's breathing deepened and she drifted into a peaceful sleep. As Sarah finally clocked out, her body ached with a fatigue that was bone deep. She waved a weary goodbye to the night shift crew and pushed through the double doors, the cool night air a welcome shock to her system. She walked towards the staff parking lot, her mind already on a hot shower and the comfort of her small, quiet apartment. But as she cut through the alleyway that served as a shortcut, a sound stopped her cold. It was a low groan, a sound of pure animalistic pain that cut through the city's ambient noise. It came from the shadows, from behind a large, overflowing dumpster. Most people would have quickened their pace, their minds inventing a dozen reasons not to get involved. But Sarah was not most people. She was a nurse. Her entire being was wired to respond to suffering. She followed the sound, her heart beginning to pound a nervous rhythm against her ribs. There, slumped against the grimy brick wall, was a man. He was dressed in layers of tattered clothing, his face obscured by a matted beard and grime. He was pale, a ghostly white under the single, flickering security light. A sheen of sweat covered his skin despite the chill in the air, and he was clutching his chest, his breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. Sarah's clinical mind took over, a switch flipping from weary commuter to emergency responder. She saw the classic signs, the textbook presentation of a massive cardiac event. This man was dying. For a fraction of a second, a cold, hard knot of fear formed in her stomach. It wasn't a fear of the man, but of the consequences. Metropolitan General's policy was brutally, unequivocally clear. It was a mantra drilled into every employee during orientation. Do not provide medical care to non-admitted individuals outside of the hospital's official capacity. It was a zero-tolerance rule, a shield forged by the legal department to protect the hospital from the endless threat of lawsuits. Engaging meant risking everything, her job, her license, the career she had poured her heart and soul into. She could call 911 and walk away. That was the correct thing to do, the safe thing. But then she looked at the man's face. His eyes were squeezed shut in agony, his lips tinged with blue. He was someone's son, maybe someone's father. And right now he was just a human being in a world of pain, alone in a dark alley. In that moment, the hospital's policy, the legalese, the threat of termination, it all evaporated. There was only the oath she had taken, a promise not to a corporation, but to humanity. She dropped to her knees, her worn-out sneakers skidding on the damp asphalt. Sir, can you hear me?" she said, her voice loud and clear. She placed 2 fingers on his neck, searching for a pulse. It was thready, weak, a hummingbird's flutter away from silence. "My name is Sarah. I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." His eyes flickered open, filled with a terrifying mix of pain and confusion. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle escaped his lips. Then his body went rigid, and he convulsed. His eyes rolled back in his head. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. He was in V-fib. Cardiac arrest. "Somebody call 911, she screamed, her voice echoing down the alley. "I have an unresponsive male, mid-60s, in cardiac arrest." Her hands flew to his chest, lacing together in the familiar, life-giving grip. She began compressions, her body moving with the muscle memory of countless training sessions. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. The grim rhythm of saving a life. She was vaguely aware of a few people gathering at the mouth of the alley, their faces illuminated by the glow of their cell phones. One of them, a young woman with pink hair, was filming. Sarah didn't care. There was only the man beneath her hands, his life balanced on a knife's edge. "I need an AED, she shouted, her voice raw. Then she remembered the emergency kit she kept in her car. "My car, a blue sedan. The trunk is open. There's a red bag. Bring it to me." Someone scrambled to follow her instructions. Seconds later, the red bag was at her side. With practiced efficiency, she tore open the man's filthy shirt, attached the pads to his chest, and stepped back as the machine analyzed his heart's chaotic rhythm. Shock advised. "Clear!" she yelled. She pressed the orange button. The man's body arched violently off the ground as the electricity surged through him. For a heart-stopping second, there was nothing. Then, on the small screen of the AED, a regular rhythm appeared, a slow, steady beat, a pulse. She was still breathing heavily, sweat beading on her forehead when the wail of sirens grew louder, culminating in the flashing red and white lights that bathed the alley in a strobing, surreal glow. The paramedics swarmed in, their movements professional and urgent. As they were loading the now stable man onto a gurney, a figure emerged from the hospital entrance, his stride stiff and angry. It was Mr. Harrison, the hospital administrator. He was a man who seemed to be perpetually clad in a tailored suit and an expression of stern disapproval. His eyes, small and hard, bypassed the paramedics and the patient and landed directly on Sarah. "Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice as cold and sharp as a scalpel. "What precisely do you think you're doing?" Sarah, still on her knees, pushed a stray strand of hair from her face. She was running on pure adrenaline. "He was in cardiac arrest, Mr. Harrison. I had to intervene." "You had to intervene?" Harrison's voice dripped with incredulous fury. "You are on hospital property, but you are off the clock. This man is not a patient. You are aware of the policy regarding employee conduct in these situations. You have just exposed this hospital to an incalculable liability." Sarah rose to her feet, her exhaustion momentarily replaced by a surge of disbelief. Liability? He was dying. He would have been dead in another minute. What was I supposed to do, check his insurance status while his heart stopped? A small crowd of onlookers had gathered, their phones silently recording the confrontation. The pink-haired girl, Chloe, stood at the front, her camera held steady. "Your duty is to this hospital, Ms. Jenkins," Harrison snapped, his face reddening. "Your actions were reckless, unsanctioned, and a flagrant violation of your employment agreement. You performed an unauthorized medical procedure on a non-admitted individual on hospital grounds." "I performed CPR," Sarah shot back, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and shock. "I saved a man's life." "You have created a legal nightmare," Harrison said, his voice low and menacing. "Effective immediately, your employment with Metropolitan General Hospital is terminated. Collect your personal effects from your locker. Security will escort you from the property." The words hung in the air, heavier than the city smog. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The paramedics paused in their work, staring in disbelief. Sarah just stood there, speechless, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a cold, hollow emptiness in its place. She watched as the ambulance doors closed on the man whose life she had just saved, the rhythmic flash of its lights reflecting in her stunned, heartbroken eyes. The career she had built, the calling she had answered, had been extinguished in a dark alley, all for an act of compassion. Chloe's phone, still recording, captured the raw, devastating injustice of it all. The next morning, the sun streamed through the single window of Sarah's small apartment, but it brought no warmth. The silence was a stark contrast to the relentless beeping and ringing of the hospital. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with the weight of her new reality. Her nursing diploma, framed in simple black wood on the wall, seemed to mock her. It was a testament to years of grueling study, sleepless nights, and unwavering dedication, all of it rendered meaningless by one man's rigid adherence to a heartless policy. A wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over her. She was unemployed. Her savings, after paying off student loans and covering the city's exorbitant rent, would barely last 2 months. But it was more than the financial fear. A formal termination for violating policy could be a black mark on her record, making it nearly impossible to find another nursing job. Worse, if the hospital reported her to the state nursing board, she could lose her license entirely. The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Nursing wasn't just a job, it was her identity, the very core of who she was. Without it, what was she? She spent the morning in a daze, cycling through a maelstrom of emotions. White-hot anger at Harrison, a deep, aching sense of betrayal by the institution she had served so faithfully, and a creeping, paralyzing fear of the future. Driven by a desperate need to know what had happened to the man she'd saved, she called the local police precinct. She was transferred 3 times before landing on the desk of a gruff, overworked officer. "Police Department, Officer Miller?" "Hello, officer," Sarah began, her voice unsteady. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I was hoping to get some information about a man who was taken by ambulance from an alley behind Metropolitan General Hospital last night." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, we can't just give out patient information. HIPAA laws, you know." "I know, but I'm the one who found him. I'm a nurse. I performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. I just want to know if he's okay." "Look, lady," Miller said, his tone dripping with impatience. "We get 100 calls like this a day. John does, overdoses, you name it. He was transported to County General, that's all I can tell you." I've got a pile of paperwork here that's not going to file itself. I don't have time for personal dramas. The line clicked, leaving Sarah listening to the dial tone, the word drama echoing in her ears. She felt small, insignificant, her genuine concern dismissed as a trivial inconvenience. Meanwhile, in a sterile, glass-walled conference room on the top floor of Metropolitan General, Mr. Harrison was in his element. He sat at the head of a long, polished table flanked by the hospital's legal team, two sharp-suited lawyers who radiated an aura of expensive, ruthless competence. The optics are not ideal, the senior lawyer, a woman named Diane, said, tapping a pen on her legal pad. Nurse fired for saving a life is a headline that writes itself. The headline is irrelevant, Harrison countered, his voice firm. What's relevant is the precedent. If we allow employees to make unilateral medical decisions outside of established protocols, we open the floodgates. Every time one of our staff helps someone on the street, we become liable. What if she had broken his ribs during CPR and he sued? What if he had died and his family claimed her intervention was negligent? We have a policy for a reason, to protect this institution. His argument was logical, clinical, and utterly devoid of humanity. The discussion wasn't about the life that was saved. It was about risk mitigation and damage control. They spent the next hour crafting the hospital's official statement, carefully choosing words that would frame Sarah not as a hero, but as a reckless, insubordinate employee who had posed a danger to both the patient and the hospital. They would praise the paramedics and the emergency services, subtly positioning Sarah's intervention as an unnecessary and dangerous interference. It was a masterclass in corporate spin designed to crush a narrative of heroism under the weight of bureaucratic justification. As they were finalizing the press release, a different kind of storm was brewing. Chloe, the pink-haired girl from the alley, had gone home. The image of Sarah's face, a mixture of heroism and devastation, seared into her mind. She couldn't shake the raw injustice she had witnessed. With a few taps, she edited the video on her phone, adding simple, stark text. This nurse just saved a man's life, and then her boss fired her on the spot. She uploaded the 2-minute clip to every social media platform she used, titling it, Hero Nurse Fired for Saving a Homeless Man's Life. She added the hashtag Justice for Nurse Sarah. For a few hours, the video was just another drop in the vast ocean of the internet. Then someone with 1 million followers retweeted it. A popular news aggregator picked it up. By noon, it was a gusher. The video exploded. It was visceral, undeniable proof of what had happened. Sarah's calm competence, Harrison's cold fury, the flashing lights, the shocked faces of the onlookers. It was a perfect, self-contained drama of heroism versus bureaucracy. Sarah's phone, which had been silent all morning, began to buzz. Then it began to ring, then it began to vibrate so incessantly she had to turn it off. Texts from friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Messages from former colleagues. DMs from complete strangers. She turned on her old laptop, her hands trembling as she typed her own name into the search bar. The results were overwhelming. Her face was on the homepage of national news websites. The hashtag Justice for Nurse Sarah was the #1 trend in the country. A GoFundMe page started by an anonymous supporter had been set up to help with her legal fees and living expenses. Its initial goal was $5,000. As she watched Bite, the total ticked past $50,000, then $75,000, climbing at a dizzying rate. She read the comments, tears streaming down her face. This is what a hero looks like. Metropolitan General should be ashamed. I'm a nurse, and I would have done the exact same thing. Solidarity, Sarah. This is everything that's wrong with corporate healthcare. Profit over people. In the midst of the digital chaos, her phone rang with a number she recognized. It was Dr. Ramirez, a kind, older emergency physician from the hospital who had always treated the nurses as respected colleagues, not subordinates. Sarah, he said, his voice warm and steady. I saw the video. I wanted to call and say that what you did was right. It was the right thing to do. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They fired me, Ben, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know, and it's a disgrace, he said, his voice laced with anger. Listen to me. Half the staff here is ready to walk out. We support you. What Harrison did was shameful. If you decide to fight this, if you need someone to testify about your character, your skill, your dedication, you call me. I'll be there." His words were a lifeline in the turbulent sea of her despair. It wasn't just the anonymous support of the internet anymore. It was a respected colleague, a friend, standing with her. For the first time since she had knelt on that cold, damp asphalt, Sarah felt a tiny, fragile flicker of hope. The world was watching, and maybe, just maybe, justice was still possible. The viral video had given Sarah a voice, but it had also given her a new mission. While the world debated the ethics of her firing, she was consumed by a single thought. The man in the alley. Who was he? Was he recovering? She felt an inexplicable bond with the stranger, whose life had become so tragically entangled with her own. Her search led her to County General, a sprawling, underfunded public hospital on the other side of the city. It was a world away from the gleaming corporate facade of Metropolitan General. Here, the paint was peeling, the hallways were crowded, and the staff looked even more exhausted than her former colleagues. After hours of navigating bureaucratic red tape and pleading her case to a sympathetic but overworked charge nurse, she finally found him. He was in a crowded four-person room, listed on the chart as John Doe. The man in the bed was barely recognizable as the figure from the alley. He was clean, his beard neatly trimmed, though his face was still pale and gaunt. He was awake, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles. "Hello?" Sarah said softly from the doorway. His head turned and his eyes, a surprisingly clear and intelligent blue, focused on her. He studied her for a moment, a flicker of recognition in his gaze. "You," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "You're the woman from the alley. The angel." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm Sarah. I'm a nurse. I was just worried about you. I wanted to see how you were doing." "They told me what you did," he said, his eyes welling with tears. "They said my heart stopped. You saved my life, and you lost your job because of it. I saw it on the news." "That doesn't matter," Sarah said, pulling a chair to his bedside. "What matters is that you're okay. What's your name?" He hesitated, a shadow of old pain passing over his features. "It's been a long time since anyone asked me that," he said quietly. "My name is Elias. Elias Vance." As Sarah and Elias began to talk, another narrative was taking shape. A tenacious local journalist named Maya Singh, sensing a deeper story behind the viral sensation, had also been digging. She had discovered that the John Doe from the alley was not just another homeless man. Her research led her to old articles and public records, painting a portrait of a man who had once been a titan in his field. Elias Vance was a brilliant, award-winning aerospace engineer, a visionary who had designed critical components for satellite communication systems. He had been a rising star. Maya managed to get an interview with the recovering Elias. He recounted his tragic story, the car accident that had claimed his wife and young daughter, the ensuing spiral into a grief so profound it had shattered his world. He lost his job, his home, and eventually himself. He had been living on the streets for nearly a decade, a ghost of the man he once was. He spoke of Sarah not just with gratitude, but with a kind of reverence. "She didn't see a homeless man," he told Maya, his voice thick with emotion. "She saw a human being. In that moment, she brought more than my heart back to life. She brought back a piece of my soul." Maya's article, "The Angel and the Engineer," was published the next day. It was a powerful, poignant piece that added a whole new dimension to the story. It wasn't just about a nurse being fired anymore. It was about the profound, life-altering impact of a single act of compassion. The public's support for Sarah, already immense, surged into a tidal wave of admiration. Faced with this escalating public relations nightmare, the board of Metropolitan General pressured a frantic Mr. Harrison to get ahead of the story. They organized a press conference. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. The conference room was packed with reporters and news cameras. The hospital's CEO, a man with a politician's smile and hollow eyes, read a carefully prepared statement expressing regret for the unfortunate circumstances and emphasizing the hospital's commitment to patient safety through established protocols. Then they opened the floor to questions. It was a bloodbath. "Are you saying your protocol is to let a man die 10 feet from your door?" one reporter shouted. "Given that Mr. Vance is a celebrated engineer, does the hospital believe some lives are more valuable than others?" another pressed. Harrison, sweating under the hot lights, stepped to the podium. He tried to defend his decision with the same cold, corporate logic he had used before. "We are a healthcare institution, not a charity. Our primary responsibility is to our admitted patients and to the operational integrity of this hospital. Ms. Jenkins' actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, were a breach of contract and a serious liability." His words, meant to sound reasonable and authoritative, came across as monstrously callous. The reporters grew more aggressive. The resulting news clips were devastating. Harrison became the face of heartless American healthcare, a villain for the public to despise. The rage bait had been taken, and the audience was furious. As the press conference disaster unfolded on every news channel, a man watched from a stunning penthouse apartment high above the city. The room was a monument to minimalist, high-tech luxury, with panoramic windows offering a god's-eye view of the metropolis. The man was Marcus Thorne. In his late 30s, he possessed an intense, focused energy, the kind that had allowed him to build a tech empire from the ground up. He watched the news, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He saw Sarah's picture, then the image of the recovering Elias Vance. A flicker of something, pain, memory, anger, crossed his face. He picked up his phone and made a call to his head of security, a former Special Forces operative. "Find out everything you can about the nurse, Sarah Jenkins," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable weight of command. "I want to know where she lives, what she needs, everything, and I want to do something for her. Something public. Something that makes a statement." He then made another call. "I need you to arrange something for me. I want 50 cars. No, not just any cars. I want 50 Bentleys. I want them parked outside her house tomorrow morning. I want the world to see what happens when someone shows true kindness." His connection to Elias Vance was a secret he had kept for years. When Marcus was a 19-year-old college dropout with a wild idea for a new kind of software, it was Elias Vance, then at the peak of his career, who had seen his potential. Elias had become his mentor, his champion, and the closest thing to a father he had ever known. He had lost touch with Elias after the tragedy and had been searching for him for years, hiring private investigators to no avail. Now, a stranger, a nurse who had sacrificed everything for an act of kindness, had not only saved his mentor's life but had also found him. Marcus Thorne believed in paying his debts, and he was about to pay this one with interest. Sarah, meanwhile, buoyed by the public support and the story of Elias, decided to take one more shot at seeking professional validation. She secured a consultation with a renowned medical ethics expert, a doctor who frequently served as an expert witness in malpractice cases. She hoped he would validate her actions, giving her ammunition for a potential legal battle. The meeting took place in a stuffy, book-lined office. The doctor, a man with a kind but weary face, listened patiently as Sarah recounted the events. "My dear," he said when she had finished, "from a purely human and ethical standpoint, you did the right thing. You are a credit to your profession." Sarah felt a surge of relief. "So you'd be willing to state that in a formal capacity?" The doctor's expression became pained. He sighed, steepling his fingers. "This is the difficult part. From a legal and institutional standpoint, the hospital's position, while morally bankrupt, is likely defensible. Their policies are designed to prevent the very liability you expose them to. Any legal challenge would be an uphill, incredibly expensive battle. They have a team of lawyers who do nothing but handle these cases. You have GoFundMe." He delivered the words without malice, but they landed like a punch. "I'm sorry, I wish I could offer you more, but I have to be honest about your chances." Sarah left the office feeling more deflated than ever. Even with the world on her side, the system itself, with its cold, unassailable logic of liability, seemed designed to crush the individual. The frustration was a bitter pill to swallow. It felt like standing before a locked steel door with no key. but she had no idea that someone was about to arrive with a battering ram. The next morning began like any other in Sarah's quiet, working-class neighborhood. The rhythmic hiss of sprinklers, the distant bark of a dog, the rumble of a garbage truck. Then, at precisely 8 o'clock a.m., the silence was broken. It began with a low, powerful purr, a sound so rich and deep it seemed to vibrate in the air. A single, gleaming black Bentley Mulsanne turned onto her street, its polished chrome catching the morning sun. It was followed by another, and another. One by one, a silent, majestic procession of the world's most luxurious automobiles glided into view. They were every color of the rainbow: classic British racing green, pearlescent white, deep sapphire blue, audacious crimson. They moved with a coordinated, almost military precision, parking nose to tail along both sides of the street, filling every available space. They parked in front of fire hydrants and driveways, their sheer, unapologetic presence transforming the humble suburban block into a scene from a billionaire's fantasy. The procession continued until a fleet of 50 Bentleys had occupied the entire cul-de-sac, their silent, powerful engines idling in unison. Neighbors emerged from their homes, coffee cups in hand, their faces a comical mixture of disbelief and awe. People on their way to work stopped their cars in the middle of the road, getting out to stare. Phones were raised, capturing the surreal, inexplicable spectacle. Sarah, woken by the unusual hum, peered through her blinds. Her first thought was that she was dreaming. Her second was that there had been some kind of terrible, ludicrous mistake. She saw the cars, the crowds, the news vans that were now beginning to arrive, drawn by the scent of an even bigger story. Her small, unassuming house was the epicenter of a media circus. Then the doorbell rang. She opened the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Standing on her small concrete porch was a man who looked as out of place as the cars lining her street. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and radiated an aura of calm, unshakable confidence. It was Marcus Thorne. "Miss Jenkins?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. "My name is Marcus Thorne. May I have a moment of your time?" Sarah, utterly bewildered, could only nod. She stepped back, allowing him into her modest living room, which suddenly felt impossibly small and cluttered. "I imagine you have some questions," Marcus said, a faint smile playing on his lips as he gestured towards the window. Are you... I don't understand," Sarah stammered. "Please sit," he said, his demeanor surprisingly gentle. He remained standing. "First, I want to thank you. The man you saved in that alley, Elias Vance, he was my mentor. When I was 19, with nothing but a crazy idea, he was the only person who believed in me. He taught me how to think, how to build, how to be a better man. He was like a father to me." Marcus's voice was filled with a raw, genuine emotion. He told her about Elias's brilliance, his kindness, and the tragedy that had sent him spiraling. He explained that he had spent years and a small fortune trying to find him, all to no avail. "You didn't just save his life, Ms. Jenkins," Marcus said, his intense gaze fixed on her. "You gave him back to me. You gave me a chance to repay a debt I thought I would carry for the rest of my life. And you did it not for a reward, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. You sacrificed your career for a man you didn't know." He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room. "I believe that an act of such profound compassion should not go unrewarded. In fact, I believe it should be celebrated, loudly." He then laid out his offer, each word landing with the force of a tectonic shift in Sarah's reality. He explained that his legal team, the best in the country, was already filing a complaint against Metropolitan General for wrongful termination and defamation. They would not only ensure her nursing license was safe, but they would see to it that it was polished to a high shine, a symbol of honor. "But that's the small part," he continued. "I've watched you. I've read about you. Your compassion is a resource more valuable than any technology I could ever invent. So I am going to fund the creation of a new, state-of-the-art charitable medical clinic. It will serve the homeless and the uninsured. No questions asked, Ogd. It will be a place where the only policy is to help. The only bottom line is human dignity." He looked at her, his expression serious. "And I want you to run it. I want you to be its director. I will provide the funding, the staff, the equipment, everything you need. You will provide the heart." Sarah sat on her sofa, speechless, tears streaming down her face. It was too much to comprehend. The cars outside, the vindication, the incredible life-altering offer. It was a fairy tale, a fantasy, a release so powerful it felt like a dream. Through her tears, she managed a single, choked word. Yes. The next week was a blur. The story of the 50 Bentleys became an international sensation, a modern-day parable of kindness rewarded. Under the relentless pressure of public scorn, a threatened lawsuit from a billionaire, and the quiet exodus of their top donors, the Board of Metropolitan General capitulated completely. Mr. Harrison was unceremoniously fired, his career in hospital administration over. The board, in a desperate act of self-preservation, called Sarah to a meeting. They offered her job back, a promotion to head nurse of the emergency department, a six-figure salary, and a public apology. The meeting took place in the same sterile boardroom where her fate had been sealed. This time, however, Sarah was not alone. She was flanked by two of Marcus Thorne's impeccably dressed lawyers. She listened patiently as the board members stumbled over their apologies and laid out their generous offer. When they were finished, she simply smiled, a calm, quiet smile that held more power than any angry words ever could. "Thank you for the offer," she said, her voice clear and steady. "But I cannot, in good conscience, work for an institution that requires a billionaire's intervention to show basic human decency. I will not be returning to Metropolitan General." She stood up, her dignity a shield. "I have my own clinic to build." She walked out of the room, leaving the board members in a state of stunned silence. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, a quiet victory that was more satisfying than any loud confrontation. The final scene was 6 months later. The Elias Vance Wellness Clinic was having its grand opening. It was nothing like the cold, intimidating hospitals that dotted the city. It was a beautiful, modern building filled with natural light, colorful art, and the buzz of hopeful activity. Sarah, dressed in a crisp lab coat with "Sarah Jenkins, RN Director" embroidered over the pocket, moved through the clinic, her expression a mixture of pride and profound joy. She was in her element, not just as a nurse, but as a leader, a healer, a force for good. The camera panned across the waiting room, filled with people who were being treated with kindness and respect, many for the first time in years. It settled on a volunteer, neatly dressed and clean-shaven, who was patiently helping an elderly man fill out his paperwork. It was Elias Vance. He looked up and caught Sarah's eye from across the room. They shared a smile of shared history, mutual respect, and a deep, unspoken gratitude. The final shot was of Sarah, standing at the entrance of her clinic, the afternoon sun framing her in a golden light. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a symbol. A testament to the fact that in a world that often felt cold and transactional, a single selfless act of compassion could still change everything. It could save a life, resurrect a soul, and build a beacon of hope where there was once only darkness.